He shoved Ghislain back and mocked the weak flow of mana coming from him, confidently predicting his victory. But Ghislain only smiled in return, a reaction that unsettled Frank. Confused by the unexpected response, Frank hesitated. In that moment, Ghislain deflected his sword and threw him off balance, then followed up with a swift kick to Frank's face, forcing him to retreat. Wiping blood from his mouth, Frank sneered, claiming such attacks were useless against his mana-hardened body. Yet seconds later, he was seized by a violent coughing fit and dropped to his knees. Shocked by the force of Ghislain's assault, Frank struggled to understand how such low mana output had penetrated his defenses. As Ghislain approached, he calmly revealed that he had long suspected someone of orchestrating his sister's downfall, but never imagined it would be Frank. With an intense stare, Ghislain activated his third core, unleashing a massive surge of mana. Frank froze, visibly shaken, unable to react in time as Ghislain appeared before him in a blur, moving faster than his eyes could follow. Then came the onslaught, strike after strike, each more powerful than the last, as Ghislain attacked with relentless force. Despite all his effort, Frank's arms began to go numb under the relentless assault, and his sword was on the verge of shattering. Struggling to recover, Frank tried to reassure himself that sudden bursts of mana usually didn't last long, but Ghislain's surge defied all logic. It was as though he had become an entirely different person. Sensing Frank's weakening defense, Ghislain struck with precision, breaking the assassin's weapon in a single, powerful blow. Without pause, he followed through with a crushing strike to Frank's torso, driving his blade deep into the man's body. Frank screamed in pain, but Ghislain silenced him by grabbing him by the throat and slamming him against the wall, his sword still buried in Frank's torso. Demanding answers, Ghislain ordered him to reveal who was behind the assassination plot. Frank refused, instead drawing a concealed blade and declaring his intent to take Elena with him. But before he could act, glowing strings wrapped around his wrist, halting his movement. Ghislain, now controlling the mana-infused threads, calmly warned Frank not to make any reckless moves. His cold, unwavering gaze fixed on his enemy, he offered a deal. He would spare him further pain if Frank cooperated and stopped resisting. Frank froze, shocked to realize the threads were made entirely of mana. He couldn't comprehend when or how Ghislain had created such a weapon. Then, with ruthless precision, Ghislain pushed the sword deeper into Frank's body and coldly remarked that someone of Frank's skill should be able to survive the wound. But his tone turned darker as he added that no amount of healing would matter once his mana core was destroyed. Panic overtook Frank as he looked down and saw Ghislain's blade glowing ominously. The assassin howled in agony as his mana core began to fracture uncontrollably. He screamed at Ghislain, accusing him of insanity, and warned that such damage could trigger a mana backlash powerful enough to destroy the entire area. He demanded to know if Ghislain intended to die alongside him. Ghislain, his expression unwavering, replied coldly that only the inexperienced made such fatal mistakes and assured Frank he was in full control. The calm conviction in Ghislain's eyes unnerved Frank. He realized Ghislain wasn't bluffing. Resigned to his fate, Frank let out a final scream and confessed Count Desmond had been the one behind the assassination. The Count, he explained, was seeking a reason to launch a war against the Perdium and Degard families. The revelation stunned Ghislain. In his previous life, plots of this scale were usually carried out by families aligned with Duke Delphine. The realization that the Duke was orchestrating chaos from the shadows without getting directly involved enraged him. Demanding answers, Ghislain asked if that was why Frank had targeted his sister. Frank gave a grim smile and confirmed it. Without hesitation, Ghislain drove his sword deeper through the assassin's body. Coughing up blood, Frank reminded him of the deal to spare him. Ghislain gave a cold smirk and asked mockingly why someone who had taken so many lives now feared death. To his surprise, Frank began to laugh. He stepped closer, declaring that his death wouldn't change anything. The Dard family's objective had already been achieved, and Perdium was doomed. He sneered, asking who would believe someone like Ghislain. Infuriated, Ghislain grabbed Frank's head and slammed it against the wall. With a sinister smile, he declared that everything would be different this time because he had been reborn. As his sword glowed with radiant power, Frank's screams filled the air. A surge of energy burst from Frank's mouth and erupted in the sky like a firework. Moments later, his lifeless body collapsed to the ground. Breathing heavily, Ghislain scanned the aftermath. The scattered corpses and his sister, still unconscious and resting peacefully, confirmed the battle's end. Satisfied that no one else remained, he dropped his sword, took a deep breath, and fell to his knees, coughing up blood. As he wiped his mouth, Ghislain muttered to himself that detonating 3 mana cores had once been effortless back when he was the Mercenary King. Forcing himself back to his feet, he resolved not to collapse now. He approached a nearby building, kicked the door open, and discovered 2 bodies inside. In his past life, a 3rd corpse had been found here alongside Elena. But based on Frank's earlier confession, Ghislain now recognized one of the dead as a son of the Degard family. The boy had been murdered along with his escort knight, and the scene had been arranged to frame Elena for the crime. Understanding the dangerous implications, Ghislain moved the bodies. He knew that exposing them would almost certainly ignite a war. Choosing instead to destroy the evidence, he lit a firecracker and set the building ablaze. As the flames devoured the incriminating scene, Ghislain picked up his sister and began to walk away. Determined, he vowed that his enemies would never see their plans succeed. Unbeknownst to him, a shadowy figure hidden among the trees had been watching. After a brief moment of silent observation, the figure slipped away into the darkness.